What's up, y'all? Henry Higuita here with episode 2 of Across the Pitch. The Five Stripes got off to a strong start in 2025, a 3-2 win in its season opener against CF Montreal. Now they head up I-85 to face Southeastern rivals Charlotte FC at Bank of America Stadium on Saturday. And to help me preview the game, I have here Brian Maurer of Top Bin 90. Brian, what's going on, man? Thanks for coming on.
Doing well, man. Excited to talk some soccer with you. Thanks for having me on.
So, Brian, we have a lot of people, from what I've heard, going up to Charlotte for the game. Where do they absolutely have to get lunch before that 2 p.m. kickoff?
I guess it's kind of a chain, but me and my wife always like going to Mellow Mushroom right down the street. There's a pizza shop right down the street. I think y'all have those probably in Atlanta as well, but
Yeah.
that's always been my stop. I don't know if it's probably not the local spot that you're looking for, but I mean that was always me and my wife's spot before a game. It's right next to the stadium there. It's like walking distance, real close.
Yeah, I dig Mellow Mushroom for sure. I've had it a couple times. There's one close by my university, so definitely check that out. But yeah, man, thanks for coming on again. Before we jump into actually previewing the game, I want to talk about a player that is, near and dear to both clubs. Anton Walkes, part of both Atlanta's and Charlotte's inaugural squads when they entered the league. Tell me a little bit about what Anton Walkes means to you guys over in Charlotte.
Yeah, that was a really intense start to 2023 when he passed away. Just every year now since, and actually I wrote a piece on it, remembering Anton, and talked to one of his school teachers from back in England, and he sent me like a story of how he used to just uh, treat competition and track and field back in the day when he was growing up, and how competitive he was, how much energy he brought to his team, his teammates, whether it was soccer, track and field, any sport he played in. And it seemed like he just made an impression wherever he went. I mean, I think that's why Atlanta fans were really shook by his passing, as well as Charlotte FC fans. And even, just he had only been in Charlotte for, just a little over a year, and really had just started making an impact on the team towards the end of 2022 in their inaugural season. And even in that short amount of time, I think he really left a lasting impact at the club. And that's why every year, there's always, at the day of his passing, there's a lot of remembrance and just acknowledgement from the fans of just his passing and what he meant to the club, the fans, the players, everyone in the organization.
Yeah, as a player that, like I said, means a lot here in Atlanta, over in Charlotte. It's just tragic what happened. And I think I heard somewhere that they are planning to do I believe a minute of silence or something like that, some sort of tribute to him at the game, like they've done before. And I think that's just a really cool gesture for a guy that was, a really genuine, a really good guy. Let's talk a little bit about Charlotte last season, 2024. Y'all finished 5th in the East. Mm-hmm. Y'all were eliminated in the first round of the playoffs by Orlando City. Summarize that season for me. What was your verdict on that season overall?
Oh, I think exceeding expectations for sure. I don't know. For me, going into the year, expectations were a little all over the place. We didn't know how Dean was going to actually get this team back on track. It felt like going into 2024, another restart for the third straight year. Where were things going to end? And even Dean mentioned that when he first got into the locker room and talked to the players, that he was talking about trophies, and he said that players didn't really feel like they believed how far he was going to take them. And then after the end results of 2024, their expectations raised dramatically going into this year. So I think he's raised the floor of this team with the structure and the defensive soundness, the ability to keep clean sheets, the ability to stay in every game. I mean, that showed this last week against Seattle when they were at the top of their form, but still able to just stay in the game and give themselves a chance. And I think that's really what Dean has established is just they're in every game, regardless of how they perform. They're able to just have a chance of getting a result, and that's really improved their end tally in terms of points in 2024 and raised their expectations and their team goals. Everybody's really established, whether it's the front office, Dean Smith as the coach, the players, everybody's really established that top four is the goal in the Eastern Conference, and trophies are the expectation as well this year, really pushing for both of those. And I think without the exceeding of expectations in 2024, those wouldn't be the standards today.
Yeah, defensive solidity definitely seems to be a strength of y'all's. Staying in those
Mhm.
games is important. And y'all made some reinforcements over the winter. Let's take a look at those actually. Got Charlotte's transfer list here, the ins and the outs, and there's a very big in that I'm noticing. Wilfred Zaha, a player with Premier League experience, a player with, a quality in the attack, which from my perspective, it seemed to be a little bit of what Charlotte was missing last season was a little bit of that attacking edge. So tell me kind of a little bit about him. What are y'all's expectations for him? And did you get to see any of him during preseason?
Yeah, we saw a little bit of flashes here and there in preseason. We only had a couple games televised, but I mean, you could kind of start to see his 1v1 ability, his explosiveness, and that's what I expect him to bring week in and week out. Just a lot of explosiveness, a lot of pace, transition moments. He's extremely dangerous in transition. That's what he did at Crystal Palace for a decade, was just being able to hit defenses on the break. And we expect him to do a lot of that in Charlotte. That's how Charlotte FC likes to play. We talked about the defensive stability. They will hang off the ball in a mid block, oftentimes looking kind of like a 4-4-2, just really solidified, kind of waiting to and absorbing a little bit of pressure. But then as soon as that turnover happens, hitting teams directly on the break. And that's where Wilfred Zaha really shines in 1v1 moments, in transition, attacking space, and attacking defensive lines directly. And I expect that to be a big part of just what he brings to this team, especially and then and end results, right? Dean Smith talked about needing a goal grabber this offseason, and that's where Wilfred Zaha comes in, being a guy who can go out there and finish a game, get that game-winning goal, and bring goal contributions on a weekly basis. Charlotte FC has really never had a player who does that consistently, and that's what Wilfred Zaha, that's what the expectations are for him this year, is to be able to be counted on for a goal contribution pretty much week in and week out.
And I also wanted to ask you, Pep Biel, he was with y'all last season.
Yeah.
I believe he was a DP on loan,
Yep.
if I'm not mistaken. And then, his loan expired, and now he's back. He's not a DP. Kind of tell me a little bit about how it went for him the first time around, and why, why is he back? What's his role now?
Yeah, I think he's still going to be one of the key creators in that midfield. Last year, he was brought in as a cam, like you said, as a DP as well, kind of on a trial period. It was like a 9-game loan spell he got, and he ended up being on the wing a lot just because of how that Charlotte kind of lacked creative depth on the wings, and so Biel ended up playing in that role on the right wing down the stretch, and that's where he really shone there. This year, he's going to be playing more of the 10. That's where he played against Seattle, and I expect him to play more centrally this year, pulling the strings, creating chances for that attacking front three. And so I think it's still a trial period, right? It's still a loan deal. They negotiated it down off of a DP contract, so he's going to be a non-DP, but his loan expires again in August, and they're going to have to kind of reevaluate. So it's sort of an extension trial period for him to whether or not he ends up staying in for the long term. But I mean, we have him until August on a non-DP deal. Gives the team a little bit of flexibility to kind of really get a full assessment, because 9 games really isn't enough time to assess a player. And so I think that's what this really provides, is getting a full assessment of Pep Biel as a creative midfielder and seeing whether or not he can be the long-term play here in Charlotte.
Now, switching over to the other column, the outgoings in this winter, the big name that stands out, Karol Swiderski. Uh,
Yeah.
he played 85 games for Charlotte, racked up 32 goals and 15 assists. Why was that the right time to move on from him?
I honestly, I had been calling for the team to kind of move on from him even a year or so before. So this saga really began in 2023, before Dean Smith, when Christian Latanzio's like struggles were really apparent, and Karol Swiderski in that summer kind of called for wanting to leave and go to Europe, and that kind of just began sort of his waning with the club, I'd say, for a time. When Dean Smith took over in 2024, he made it clear that, like, if you're not really involved in our project, we're going to move you. We don't care what kind of contract you're on. That led him to a loan spell to start 2024. During the season, Enzo Capetti also didn't work out. So the team was kind of lacking goals, lacking DPs. And Carroll also just didn't end up having a spot to go. There was an issue with the contract on that loan spell to Hellas Verona. Apparently the negotiation was if they didn't get relegated, he was supposed to earn a permanent deal there. And for some reason, Hellas Verona was able to back out of that deal. So he kind of wound up back in Charlotte in the summer last year. Yeah, it's been a chaotic little bit of a saga, as I
Sounds
can
like
see by
it.
your reaction. And so then he kind of ended up back, but had a strong finish to the year. But I think it was just more or less a time to kind of pass on. I think Patrick Agiman's strong showing at times last year, his strong January camp with U.S. men's national team also led to just, convincing the club to maybe giving him more minutes, a stronger showing to see whether or not he can be the guy, or just giving him more minutes, and then he ends up being earning a bigger transfer move as well for himself. So I think it just kind of leads to the situation where you've got Karol Swiderski, who's a DP in his prime. You've also got a young prospect who is looking for more minutes, and you've got two guys who at the stages of their career need 2,000 plus minutes to really assess and just progress their careers. And so when you have that situation, somebody generally has to go. And so in this spot, it was Karol Swiderski.
Yeah, and you talked about players wanting to move on, kind of wanting to, uh, I guess, not really 100% involved in the project, and that to me, from the Atlanta side, it reminds me a little bit of Thiago Almada last season.
Mhm.
He had been saying for a while that he wanted to go to Europe, that was his goal. He joined Atlanta because he wanted to be the next Almiron and be the springboard, that to be the springboard to Europe. And so for a lot of 2024, it seemed like his performance kind of declined because he really wanted to go, and he finally got his move. And something similar happened there with Yakimakis. That was a little bit of another issue, but I kind of relate what you said to what we experienced last season. So we kind of had to hit the hard reset button.
Yep.
And we're here now, a little bit brighter. But now 2025 is underway. Match day 1 in the books. Charlotte opened the season with a 2-2 draw at Seattle Sounders. It came down to an own goal in the final minutes. What did you make of that game?
I think honestly, Charlotte played terribly. It was a really, really poor performance. Not what any of the fan base, I would say, expected. Dean Smith also, I was in the post-match presser. It was a late night. It was like a 1 a.m. Zoom press conference, and he was extremely, extremely frustrated, upset. He expressed it very clearly. He called out pretty much the entire team outside of Idan Toklamadi, a young prospect who came in off the bench and helped earn that own goal, and Kalina were like the only two players he said had a positive performance. He pretty much called out everybody else as just not showing up and setting the standard. And so he said the only positive thing from the game was that the flight home was shorter than the flight out. And it ended up not being the case. They ended up getting delayed, their flight getting delayed. So
Oh
it
no.
was, yeah. So there were no positives to be taken from this, according to Dean Smith. And so, yeah, I'd say it was a performance where Charlotte is grateful to be getting the point. Seattle probably could have had 3 or 4 goals and knocked Charlotte out of this game. They couldn't establish any sort of control, especially in the second half. Seattle had a lot of the ball, a lot of the chances throughout that second half and the game. I would say Charlotte was second best pretty much in every facet of the game. And Dean Smith called it out as well. So I expect sort of like a mini reset from that in terms of just how Dean approached training this week. I'd imagine he was probably pretty hard on the players. It sounded as if he was going to be. It sounded like he was pretty upset. And the team had responded to Melanda also in that press conference, said that the point was the only thing that was good about this experience, about that game. Melanda also scored in the game, off of a set piece header. And he said that was the only positive he took away from the game. Everything else was below par. And so I'd say this is going to be a big bounce back week. This is what the club expects. This is what the fans expect, to come home to Charlotte in the home opener. Lots of energy against Southern rivals to really try to reestablish themselves, because I would say they were far below par and below expectations, especially around the hype that was built up going into the season. Like we talked about earlier, having high expectations, going for top four in the East, going for, trophies, whether it's US Open Cup or competing in the MLS playoffs or competing for Supporter Shield, all of those things, or Leagues Cup as well, right? If those are the expectations going into the season, showing up that poorly against another team that's going to be competing for trophies like the Sounders was not a great way to start. And so this is going to be a really important bounce back moment for that club.
And I imagine, the absence of Wilfred Zaha also played a little bit of a part there. If you're
Yeah.
expecting your big attacking signing to kind of help you out in those situations, but how much, I guess, how much does that performance, like, I get one game, it's like small sample size, but
Yeah.
like, are y'all anywhere near like panicking at this point?
No, I don't think that. I mean, panic button doesn't need to be hit for months and months, right? I mean, MLS, you have plenty of time to readjust, reassess, and kind of get a season back on track. Maybe it doesn't, maybe more shorter term. If you're looking for a top four finish or supporter shield, can get decided a little bit earlier, but most of your goals can still be within range for months and months, and you have a chance to kind of reassess and get the ship back on track. So I wouldn't say anywhere near to the panic button. It's one game. It's a road game. It's a tough place to play. It's a long travel. It's a long flight to Seattle. It was bad weather. There was, a lot of factors in play, and against a tough opponent. So I'd say, if it's another bad performance against Atlanta at home this weekend, I would say that might trigger a few flags, but I would say hold off until after this home matchup, really after this first four games where it's against a lot of tough competition, because we had Seattle last week, Atlanta this week, we got Inter Miami on the road next week, and then Cincinnati at home. So it's a pretty tough 4-game stretch to start the year. So it's sort of like how do they get through that first 4 games? And then how do they react after those with the next stretch when they have a little bit of a lighter schedule based on 2024 results? So I'd say after the first 10 is where you really get a good assessment of how things are going. But yeah, I wouldn't say panic button yet, but definitely like a need to see the team respond in a positive way.
Yeah, I didn't realize it, but y'all have a gauntlet to start. That is
Yeah.
brutal. But if y'all come out the other side, then that is a huge credit to y'all.
Yeah.
But let's talk about the game on Saturday. Let's look at that predicted lineup that
Hmm.
you sent me. Uh, Walk me through it real quick. I see that Zaha's back,
Yeah.
so walk me through this lineup, man.
Yeah. So I mean, obviously, it's still maybe not 100% confirmed that Wilfred Zaha will start, but him being back today, and Dean said he was going to train this afternoon and be with the club tomorrow, gives him a decent chance to actually being ready and able to at least be a part of the squad, if not starting. So that's why I got him in the starting lineup. I feel like he's going to need a big, big performance. It's his debut. We saw a lot of really strong debuts, including Latte Loth. I would say even like Miguel Almiron's return was a solid first performance for him since coming back from, since 2018. So I'd say, and then across the league, Denke had a great debut. There were debuts all over the place that were just really, really strong performances. So I think Wilfred Zaha, being a Premier League veteran, needs to also show that he can hit the mark and and have a strong debut, especially in front of a big home crowd. So that's the first note there. Lila Bada also needs to, I think, to have a big game on the right side. He was sort of asked to step up and be the leader. He's the other DP on this team in Wilfred Zaha's absence, and he kind of disappeared against Seattle. So I think he also needs to have a big game on that right side, since he's also going up against a backup fullback as well. I think the other position of note to mention is Brant Bronico. I put Brant Bronico in there. I'd imagine it's a coin flip between him and Eric Williamson, our other new signing. We didn't really touch on him earlier, but he was brought in on a pretty friendly trade, only for like 100K GAM. Eric Williamson, who's a U.S. men's national team veteran, who's got caps, with the U.S. men's national team, multiple years in Portland, lots of experience, having a hard time staying healthy, but was brought in to be a little bit more of a ball progressor and just being able to help the team establish a little bit more control on the ball. And I felt like he really missed the mark in his first game. And Brant Bronico, for me, is likely to come in just to help assure Dean that he's got guys on the field who are going to bring the energy, bring a higher work rate, which was something that was missing in the opener. So I'd also look out for Brant Bronico to get the start, just to help add that work rate, add that energy to the team that they were lacking in Seattle. Other than that, really, the rest of the lineup is pretty much the same and going to be the same moving forward for, barring injury or barring continuous poor performances.
What can we expect to see from Charlotte in terms of like their play style? How do you describe the way that Charlotte plays?
Yeah, I would say they kind of, I mean, a lot of off the ball, right? So they don't they concede possession to their opponents most of the time. You're looking in the 30 to 40% possession range. Not a super high pressing team, but they do establish themselves pretty well in a mid block. It almost kind of looks like a 4-4-2 off the ball, and just kind of really where they stay compact, they stay organized, and then they kind of time their presses and time their spots to create turnovers. And then once those turnovers do happen in the middle third or their own third, they spring counterattacks directly and quickly. They also mix in some long balls in over the top because you got Patrick Ajiman up there, who is very dangerous in 50-50 situations. That was another concern. He didn't really get a lot of those opportunities in the opener. So having him just be in spots where he's 1v1 with somebody on your back line and getting him a 50-50 ball over the top is where he really can shine. And so those kind of situations needing to come up. Also, just finding Pep Bial in the middle and giving him an opportunity to create with Lila Bada and Wilfred Zaha, both with their pace, getting in behind and creating chances with their explosiveness and speed and directness. And then, Malanda also, with his ability to hit the long ball over the top. Tim Ream also can hit a good pass. We've noticed recently that Tim Ream has been a little bit of a weak link in terms of defensive stability at the left back role. He's playing out of position, right? He's been playing out of position since he took over that left back spot towards the end of last season. And so we saw that Georgie Minungo for Seattle Sounders last weekend kind of had his way with them a little bit on that side, created the assist for Jordan Morris on the first goal. And it just seemed like Tim Ream was just a little bit outmatched there. And Georgie's not really one of the top wingers in this league. So going up against guys like Miguel Almiron, who I also noticed will also invert and kind of move all over the field. So it seems like Tim Ream could have to deal with him, but then also rotating like Latte Loth seemed to really kind of bounce around, even though obviously finishing his runs and ending up in and around the box. It also seemed like he was willing to kind of move around to get in on the action. So it seems like Tim Ream could really have to deal with Almiron, even Maranchuk a little bit. It seems like he also kind of moves all over the place. And so just it seems like that could be a situation that ends up being a little bit of a handful for him. We saw issues with him just defensively in the opener. So that I think is one concern for Charlotte, seeing how he matches up against whether it's Miguel Almiron or if they overloaded on that side at all with Maranchuk and Almiron and Latte Loth, just seeing how that side of Charlotte's defense handles those kind of situations.
For Atlanta's side, that front four, typically Ronnie Dyla does give them a lot of freedom to move around, to float, to do that. And a big tenet of Ronnie Dyla's system is creating those overloads on the wings. And so that's where you're going to see like Matt Edwards coming forward and potentially creating that overload with whether it's Almiron or whether they swap and it's Saba or even Latte Lat or Moranchuk find themselves in that sector of the field. They will create those overloads because that is part of the game plan. So that's going to be it's going to be interesting to see how Charlotte deals with it and how Tim Ream will adjust to that. And the thing is, with Atlanta, the risk of sending Matt Edwards forward is that you leave space exposed for Zaha from what I'm seeing.
Yeah.
So that's going to be interesting to see how they balance that. What do you think of that?
No, I think that's exactly a good concern, and I think that's you could absolutely see that as I mean, I think that matchup overall is just going to be key because it's a really inexperienced fullback going up against a really experienced winger. You know, if Zaha gets the start, so I think that's going to be one of the key matchups. I also think on the other side, Nathan Byrne going up against Saba Lobanice is going to be key. Saba probably gets talked about the least these days because of all the other big signings around the club. But from what I noticed in y'all's opener when I watched it, y'all overloaded that left hand side a lot, and Saba had a lot of creativity and just opportunities to help get chances in for these guys. He had, I think, the most chances for like key passes created. He had an assist, a couple of big chances for Latte Loth. So even though he's maybe the least talked about in y'all's front four right now, it really seemed like he was a key part of y'all's attack this last week based on how you talked about overloaded that left side and giving Saba a chance to really bring some energy and spark some life into that attack. And see, the thing is about Charlotte's right-hand side, Nathan Byrne, when in possession, Nathan Byrne generally is going forward based on how this back line is set up because Tim Ream kind of slots into like more of an elbow back. And so it's a back three with Ream, Privet, and Malanda, and then Byrne kind of shoots up the right. So if y'all continue to overload that left side, how does Charlotte deal with that when they're trying to get Byrne forward to kind of help create more opportunities down that right side while y'all are also trying to overload and create chances on that left-hand side? So I think that's going to be one other area to focus on in this game.
You mentioned, Saba is kind of the sneaky guy in this front four. I know you're an MLS fantasy guy. I am too. Yeah. And look, there's a reason he was behind Latte Lat, the guy that got the most points for Atlanta. He had, obviously the assist on the goal, but also he creates a lot of chances. And with this front three, with your DPs all in place, kind of dragging attention of the defenders and all these other players around them, it opens space for Saba. We saw this in preseason. They move around the right side and they look for a switch of play to find Saba in space. And he has so much pace that he can really, really attack that side and cause a lot of issues. And that's why we were seeing him score, I think it was 2 or 3 goals in preseason. It was just that way. Him running into that space and just taking all of that because everyone else is so preoccupied with, I have to cover Miguel Almiron or I have to cover Moranchuk because they will wreak havoc on this side if I don't.
Nice. Yeah, I think for Charlotte, you actually have a kind of a similar situation, different profile, but that's what kind of I think Charlotte fans are expecting of Patrick Agiman because the focus is going to be on Wilfried Zaha, on Leo Labada, on Pep Biel a little bit. These guys that are a little bit higher profile, DP level signings, or Pep Biel was a DP signing, right? So these guys kind of taking and occupying a lot of the defensive focus, leaving space open for Patrick Agiman. Again, he's not going to be breaking away on the wings the way Saba does for you guys, but still finding space centrally, finding more 1v1s and less situations where he's dealing with both center backs and giving him a little bit more space and time to kind of operate there centrally. So that's something that Patrick Agiman is aiming for, and I think a lot of Charlotte fans are anticipating seeing him find this year as well.
We do this now, where we, the Scarves and Spikes crew, we do our score predictions, and we're doing a new thing this season where we are the guests on this show give us the predictions, and y'all are competing against us now. Now, Andy Coronado of the Ballers Around Montreal got y'all off to a great start. Y'all are in first place after week 1. You need to continue the streak. So give me your score prediction for this game.
Yeah, my score prediction. I'm gonna give the same one I gave on our show this last on Monday. I think Charlotte wins 2-1. I think they do have a bounce back game. I think they, especially now with Wilfred Zaha back, there should be some uh, momentum being built in the locker room, and just the vibe should be pretty positive. And I think they're going to show up. I think it's going to be hard for them to keep a clean sheet against y'all's attack, but I think a 2-1 result is in the cards.
Sweet. And who scores?
I'm going to give Zaha goal in his debut. Going to keep those debutants' performances strong. And I think Ajman gets another one. And
Cool,
then
cool, cool.
for Atlanta, let's I think Almiron.
I would love an Almiron goal. We were expecting one for him in the Benz. It would have been the perfect storyline. But alas, I'll have to wait another week. All right, Brian. Well, you have any final thoughts before we get out of here?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's it's an interesting rivalry now because of the whole Almiron saga. I mentioned him just scoring the goal, but I think just the fact that Charlotte FC had him on his discovery rights, looking to sign him, y'all come in, swoop in, and get your former star. And I think it just adds another layer to this rivalry, and so it's going to be really exciting to see him coming to the bank. And then also just that matchup with Wilfred Zaha. I'm really excited. I think this is probably the most excited I've been about a Charlotte FC Atlanta matchup so far.
What makes the rivalry very exciting to me is that both teams feel like they are good. I feel like in previous seasons it was kind of getting there, kind of mid-table-ish. It feels like both of these teams have the potential to be contenders in the East. And I'm saying that I predicted Atlanta third in the East and Charlotte fourth, because I do think that the teams have improved to a point where they can go up there. And especially because the record right now is like 3-3. Like Charlotte has won 3 and Atlanta has won 3. And so that the fact that it's that even, I think it adds a little bit more kind of juice to it, I guess is what I'm saying.
Nice.
Brian, where can people find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Bam Maurer Media. You can also find all my written content at topbid90.com. And also, you mentioned MLS Fantasy. I also do an MLS Fantasy show called Dropping Points. So you can find that at Dropping Points. And we do a weekly show where we break down just the previous week's matchups, the players we're interested in for the upcoming week, and everything like that. So if you're interested in getting involved in MLS Fantasy, come join the show. You can get involved and play the game anytime, all season.
Well, Atlanta United at Charlotte FC at Bank of America Stadium on Saturday. Kickoff set for 2:15 p.m. As always, be sure to check the website, scarsandspikes.com, for news, opinions, and more. Be sure to check out the shop where you can grab yourself some sweet merch. We got some hats, we got some hoodies, we got some beer glasses, we got a ton of cool stuff. And then finally, if you haven't already, join our Patreon. Starting at $1.17 a month, you have exclusive access to interview audio, bonus content, our Discord, where we're actually running a fantasy league. And so after this call, I need to get some fantasy advice on my lineup. But yeah, that'll do it for this week, y'all. Thanks so much for watching. And thank you, Brian, for coming on.
Cheers.